One for this THiNK. And as I said yesterday, thank you very much for this full house. A huge part of the excitement of THiNK is the incredible energy and commitment you bring to it as an audience. So thank you once again. Before we start, of course, there are a lot of people we need to thank. Our title sponsor, Airtel, our principal sponsor, SR, our associate sponsors, Adani, Shivas, Absolute, JSW, and Wave, supporting sponsors, BHEL, DLF, Goa Tourism, UPT, session sponsors, DCB Bank, Galgotias University, IndusInd Bank, Louis Philippe, Maharashtra Tourism, Pipau, Salgaonkar, Unitech, United Phosphorus, and Konkan Irrigation Development Corporation. We have a product display by PS Jewelers and Toyota, our health partners, Miot International, our beverage partners, Coca-Cola, magazine partner, Planet Goa. Our newspaper partner is Hindustan Times. Our bookstore is run by Full Circle. And of course, tonight we're going to have that big auction by Delhi Art Gallery, and the exhibition is outside in the pre-function area. And now for the first session of day one of the most enduring mysteries of the world is the human brain. We know what goes into it as sensory and cognitive impulses, and we know what comes out. But what happens inside is a black box. Some of the most cutting-edge neuroscientists on this earth are trying to crack that black box, and we have one of them here for you today. A man of absolutely disruptive genius, Moran Cerf. Moran is 37 years old, but he's been an air pilot, a radio host, an inventor, a furniture designer, but most crucially, he's been a hacker and a bank robber. Moran and his friends used to hack into banks and steal about $10,000 a day, and then they would offer themselves up as security experts to tighten that security. Until one day, at a conference, he had a chance encounter with the brain and consciousness, where somebody said that hacking into the brain is pretty much like hacking into a computer. And this was Moran's sort of eureka moment. He went off to Caltech, got a PhD in neuroscience, and he's been breaking into the brain and burglaring it ever since. So if today you have questions about the mechanism of the brain that makes you like THiNK, or why you find it interesting, or what makes you feel the way you feel, he's been robbing the answers, and he's here today. Please welcome Moran Cerf.
Good morning. What you see here is a black screen. There's nothing there, and there's everything there. This is, to me, science. There's a saying that I love, which is, it's really hard to find a black cat in a dark room, especially if there is no cat. And to me, this is somewhat science. You're looking in all kinds of dark rooms, trying to find something that maybe isn't even there. And I've been doing that for years and years of my life, way before I became a scientist. When I started my career in computer security, we would basically use something we called black box method to try to understand the computers from the inside. We did it in the following way. We would take a system, we would control the inputs we feed into it, we would see what come out. Sometimes we had some information about what's the inside, but very little, and we would try to infer from that how the system works. We used to call it active marketing. We would first go and break it in the bank, find flaws, and then come to the board and say, you know, you have problems, maybe you should hire us to help you stop them. And they usually did. And as we did that for a while, the methods that I learned became very useful for me in the future. Let me first show you kind of how it would look like if you were to try to break into a website, let's say. So let's say one day you wake up in the morning, And you decide that you want to kind of go browse around a website, or maybe a shopping website, and you start looking around, and then you land on this CD that you like, the Beatles, and you say, oh, I should purchase that, and you click a button, and you add it to your cart, and you say, okay, I like that, and then you keep browsing, and maybe you find a book of an author that you really like, and you say, oh, I should also buy that, and then this also is added to your cart, and then the system recommends looking at another book about monkeys, because they're relevant to studies of the brain, and you say, oh, I love the brain, so I'll buy this book as well, and you add that to the cart, and maybe you say, I'm curious about the security, so I should also buy a book about security, and now you're ready to pay. So you go to the website, and you look at the checkout of all the things, and you see that it's pretty expensive. The CD is almost $14, everything else is pretty expensive. You say, no, I changed my mind, I don't really want to pay that much money, it's like $190 for that. Today, I want to just get it for free. Sometime else I'm going to pay, but today I just want to get it for free. Maybe there's a way to do that. You say, let's start looking at the system and see if there is a way. So you start poking inside your computer, and you say, somewhere there, the system knows which books I ordered, which CDs I wanted to buy, and how much they cost. Maybe it's written somewhere that I can access. Maybe it's not encrypted. So you start poking around in your browser, and maybe you go to your cookies, which is where browsers keep their memories, and you look at them, and maybe you see that one of them has a lot of information about your stuff, and you go back and you say, what if I can tamper with this cookie? I can change something in it. Maybe it's going to be useful in the future. And you do. You change it back. So instead of having all the prices add up to $193, you change one item to be negative $81. And suddenly, when you add them up, instead of being 193, it becomes 0. So you actually slice your credit card, but you just get charged nothing, and you get your 4 items. Or maybe you say, you know, today I prefer not to work at all, and I want to change one of them to negative $1,000 and actually start making money from buying books. Now, presumably, most websites right now don't let you do that anymore. This used to be the case in the 90s, when people weren't really concerned about security. But I used to do that often, play with the inside of those black boxes, and figured out that this could be useful in many other things. And I actually decided I'm going to change my career from doing that to being something else, when something that I did there killed me. Literally, it killed me. It happened on a Monday morning. I was walking to my office, and I decided to stop at a bank to deposit a check I had. This is the 90s, so you still had to go inside the bank to do that. And I go inside, and I hand to the teller my check and my credit cards, and she slides that, and she's about to deposit my check. And suddenly, she types my information, and she becomes all pale. And she says, sir, give me a second. And she leaves the room and comes back with a security guard and the manager of the bank. And he looks at me and he says, there's a problem. We cannot deposit money in your account because, how shall I say it? The system says you're dead. Now, I was alive. I was definitely sure about that. So I didn't know what was going on there, and they didn't know either, but they said, the system says you're dead. A further investigation led to the following thing. At the time, my team and I, we were working on trying to break into the website of the Ministry of Interior. And they have a big database that has a record of every person in the country. And for every person, they have a row that says their surname, their first name, date of birth, their marital status. And they also have a field there that says whether you're dead or alive. And my team wanted to demonstrate how they could actually access the system and change anyone's records, so they chose someone that they knew well and changed his record from alive to dead. And it immediately spread into all the other systems, and before they knew it, I was declared dead. They didn't mention that to me at the time, but what was worse was that there was no way to go back. See, all the systems feed from this thing, but they never actually think that someone can come back to life after they're dead. So once you declare dead, you're dead forever. So we had a long period where I had to go and deal with the fact that I was dead. There were some good things. All my parking tickets were canceled, and some other things were good about that. But ultimately, this wasn't the best experience. And that's when I started thinking that maybe it's going to be useful to, instead of being dead because of your work, to apply the same methods that you use to destroy things and to break into things into exploring one of the ultimate black boxes in the world. The thing that really has the same physical manifestation. You can control the inputs, you can control the outputs, and you don't really see what's going on inside. But maybe there's a way to use the same techniques to infer how this thing works. So I left my career as a hacker and went to school trying to be a neuroscientist. And it was clear to me that if I want to be a neuroscientist, what I care about is seeing the insides of the brain, the memories, the thoughts, the intentions, the dreams. And I started kind of looking at what people do. And that's when I learned that there's a group at Berkeley, in San Francisco, in California, who are studying how thoughts look in the brain and are able to see them visually. What they do is they take human subjects and put them in a big machine called an MRI scanner. This machine basically injects magnetic fields through your brain, sees what gets absorbed, and they infer from that how much parts of their brain consume energy. So what they do is they have a person sit in this machine and watch movies, one after the other, like the movies here, and they look at the brain and they see what parts of the brain take more energy, and maybe this somehow tells you what the brain cares about. So maybe they will have a person look at these movies, and first they see little kids, and this part of the brain gets active, and then they show an adult, and this part of the brain gets active, and maybe then they show an ocean, and then another part gets active, and if they do it enough times, they're starting to see patterns. They see that maybe the same parts always get active when you see a human being. A different part always gets active when you see texts. And they start saying, well, let's try the following thing. Let's take a computer and have the computer look at the brain and just see what part lights up while we have the subject watch movies. The computer wouldn't know what movies are out there, but it would try to see which parts are active and maybe infer from them something about the movies. So they did exactly that. They had the person is watching those movies, and the computer just looks at all kinds of words and try to say, I think that this part is active, this part before was the part that had to do with people talking. So maybe what the person is seeing right now is someone talking, and now this part is active, so maybe there's a fish there, and maybe there's an ocean, someone dancing, and just from that, the computer was able to pretty good describe people's thoughts and what movies they're watching. I was fascinated by that. And at the same time, I felt that I wish we could do better. Because one of the problems of this study was that they could only look at low resolutions. They could say it's a person, it's a text, it's an object. They couldn't say if it's your mother or your grandmother, if the person is looking at you directly or if it's their profile. And I said, I wish we could somehow look at the brain from the inside and really see thoughts in a higher resolution. Now, it's really hard to get people to let you poke inside their brain. Normally, they wouldn't want to do that. But imagine that someone would let you do that, look inside their brain. How would this look? If you zoom inside a brain, if you look inside a human's brain, what you see is a forest of cells, billions and trillions of cells talking to each other, and each of them cares about something in the world. Every little cell in this forest says something to each other, to the others, and telling them something about the world. And if you could eavesdrop on one of those cells at a time, one cell at a time, you can actually see what they care about. Now, if you were to put a microphone next to a cell, one of those many cells in the brain, what you're going to hear is something that sounds like that. Each of those spikes of activity, those electrical bursts, is a cell in the brain telling its neighbors, I care about something in the world. Whenever you hear that, the cell says, I care about something. If you can know what made the cell active, you can figure out what the cell encodes. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to look at the brain from the inside and put hundreds of microphones in the brain and listen to cells. And when I was in Los Angeles in school, I learned that there is a place where you can do just that. There was a neurosurgeon at UCLA, Professor Itzhak Fried, who was doing something remarkable. He was conducting studies on humans for clinical reasons. They had problems. And for those studies, he had to open their brain, put electrodes inside, and see one at a time how those cells encode their disease. Maybe they have epilepsy, and you want to know what is the origin. Maybe they have something else, and you want to see what it is and take it out afterwards. So this was an opportunity for us, scientists, to collaborate and actually use the fact that there's a human being there, awake, behaving, waiting to find out what's wrong with them, and also ask them questions about their choices, feelings, emotions, behaviors, and understand how they look from the inside. Let me show you an example. Here is one woman. She's sitting in bed with her brain open and wires inside. What I'm going to play to you right now are the sounds of one cell in her brain. And this cell encodes something. What you're going to see above are the movies that she's watching. She's sitting there and watching all those movies, one at a time. And what you're going to hear is the sound of one cell in her brain. Try to see if you can figure out what this cell cares about.
Welcome to Hollywood. Everybody comes to Hollywood, got a dream. What's your dream?
I have a dream that one day
Welcome to Wall Street and the New York Stock Exchange, the world's largest and surprisingly one of...
Hey, Dad! Right on time.
Get out of here. Now, jump in, Mark. Trust me. The Simpsons. When this woman saw The Simpsons, one cell in her brain became very active. This was the cell in her brain that encodes the thoughts of The Simpsons. Whenever she thinks of them, this cell fires. And in fact, all of you have the same set of cells in your brain. If you know what it is, then somewhere in your brain, something lit up just now, telling you, I see The Simpsons. And what's remarkable about those cells is that they encode very specific memories. They don't even need to see things. You just have to imagine things for them to be active. And here's how we know that. Because we came back to her a few hours later and told her, now, instead of seeing something on the screen, just try to recall what you've seen before. Just try to recount in your brain the things that you've seen earlier and tell us. And what you're going to see now is that as she remembers The Simpsons, the cell becomes active again. She doesn't see anything. She just thinks about them, and it's active. In fact, it gets active a second and a half before she speaks. So we can see her thoughts before she expresses them. Let me make sure. Too bad. Okay, I'm going to skip that. What you would have seen is the cell firing, and at some point it starts firing, and then she says, oh, yes, The Simpsons. This would have been seeing memories in action. Now, in all of us, when I speak to you right now, I feel as if I'm just saying what I think right away and I just express it. But in fact, we all have cells in the brain that encode the thoughts before they come out. So we can actually see the thoughts before they are out there. And this is remarkable because this allows us to now eavesdrop at the brain at thoughts as they happen in very, very specific things. I know that later today, you're going to see Garry Kasparov talking about chess. Now, ultimately, computers are trying very hard to find ways to play chess against people in a very good way. And we're developing all kinds of algorithms, all kinds of tools to see how people play and infer something about how computers should play. But what if you could have electrodes inside his brain? Not only can you see the next move that he's about to make and beat him in every chess game, but you can also learn how he thinks. You can build a computer that actually mimics his way of thinking. This is the ultimate thing we want to do. Have computers that are able to learn something from our thoughts and replicate our behavior. So what I did first was I said, okay, if we can find cells in the brain that encodes thoughts, what if we can just project the thoughts on the screen? Meaning we can have the patient think of one thing or another, Simpson, the Eiffel Tower, a fish, a person. We'll see the cells getting active in the brain, and then we will show on the screen the patient's thoughts. So they were sitting there, thinking of one thing, and we would show that thing on the screen. Thinking of another thing, we show the other thing on the screen. We would basically show their thoughts, one at a time, on the screen in front of their eyes. Now, this is not surprising, given that we know how the thoughts look in the brain. But what is remarkable is that this work was used later on by a group in Brown University to do something even further. They said, if I can see thoughts in the brain as they happen, maybe I can activate machines based on these thoughts. So they took people who, for some reason, lost the ability to control their body. Let's say the woman on top who was in a car accident, and she was hurt from the neck down, so she couldn't use her arms. But the brain still had all the controls. The brain still had the places that control the movement of the arm left, right. So instead of using her arm, they put a prosthetic arm in front of her, and they just read her mind, read her thoughts, figured out what she wants to do. She wants to move left, right, and they connected this to a machine that, for the first time after 13 years, allowed her to grasp a can of coffee and drink by herself. or the person down below who was able to move channels on the screen and move his wheelchair and open and close his arm and do all kinds of things that he was not able to do for many years just by controlling those things on the outside. When this came out, I was contacted by a lot of news and media outlets who asked me what I think about this thing, how I interpret it, what could it be, and I made the biggest mistake a scientist can do. I started making predictions about the future. So first I said, this is remarkable, this is great, and then they asked me, what do you think, where do you think it's going to go in the future? And I said, well, in the future, we could not only activate machines by thinking of the brain, but we could actually interpret thoughts, memories, and even dreams. And the day after, the headline in the news was, scientists say that dream recording is possible. Now, I did say that, but this wasn't the main thing we did. But this is pretty sexy. So the day after, a lot of other news outlets started saying dream recording is possible, dream recording is being done, dream recording is being done by the CIA, and they collect your dreams in a collection. There's a machine that records it, there's a scientist that does it. Before long, I was known as the scientist who is able to record your dreams. And I made a vow to never, ever in the future make predictions about the future. But the remarkable thing happened a year ago. And suddenly I got a call from the same reporters, and they said, you know, a group in Japan, in Kyoto, was actually able to do the same thing. They're recording dreams right now. Would you care to comment on that? What these guys did is they used the same technique that we used in finding cells in the morning that tell you what the patient thinks about, but then they asked the person to go to sleep. And they just waited for him to go to sleep, and then the computer just looked at the brain and said, I think that the part of the brain that's active right now is part of the brain that encodes thoughts about the Simpsons, about his mom, his dad. And then they tried to infer what he's seeing in his sleep. And then they woke him up and asked him, and lo and behold, they were able to indeed see hints of the narrative of what this person was seeing. Then came the most remarkable thing. A group in Pittsburgh, I wasn't related to that at all, did the same thing that the first group in Brown did with the moving of the hands with monkeys. They took a monkey, they tied his hand on the right, and instead they put a robotic arm in front of him. So when the monkey wanted to reach for the marshmallow, they love marshmallow, instead of his hand moving, the robotic arm, which read activity from his brain, just moved and grasped the marshmallow for him. So he was able to quickly learn that when he just wants to move his hand, instead of his hand moving, this robotic arm is moving, grasping the marshmallow for him and feeding it to him. The monkey quickly learned that it's working, so he was very happy with that. He started eating marshmallows, and the most impressive moment happened afterwards, when at some point they untied his real arm. Now he could use his hand or the robotic hand to use that. What he did was he used the robotic hand to pick the marshmallow and his own arm to scratch his head. So effectively, he got a new skill. Now he had 3 arms, his 2 arms that he can use to do things, and a third arm that he controls from the same brain to eat. And this is what we all want. What we all want is to start getting more skills, to start being able to do things that we can't do now. Not just to fix our bodies when they're damaged, but actually get wings to be able to fly, all kinds of skills that we don't right now have. If we wait for evolution to develop wings for us, maybe it's never going to happen, maybe it's going to take millions of years. No one in this room is going to get to enjoy that. But since our brain has all this plasticity and it can be changed, what if we start connecting that to things in the world and activating things in the environment just by connecting it and teaching the brain how to control them? For instance, when I flew to Goa yesterday, I wanted to know what the weather in Goa is. I didn't really know. I went online and I checked on the weather.com, and it told me that it's sunny here, and I had to dress up properly. And I had to remind myself, what does 32 degrees Celsius means? I just had to go to my memory and remind myself what it means. But the reality is that my brain also interprets temperatures. What if I could, instead of just remembering how it feels, feel for a second how 32 degrees feel and know exactly what to wear? What if my gas tank in the car talked to my brain, and whenever it reaches almost empty, it would just feel some kind of a pain in my brain telling me time to get gas? What if my stock exchange would go up and tell my brain when they go up that I'm feeling reward, or pain when they go down? All of those mechanisms are in my brain, and I can just connect them easily to the computer. We are now in an era where we're starting to replace body parts and change body parts for people that lost function. So we take athletes that lost their limbs, and you connect prosthetic legs that allow them to run around. We're still not allowing ourselves to change anything with the brain, because we're pretty prestigious and religious and a little bit scared of any change in the body. But the reality is that not long ago, about 60 years ago, we were also very concerned about changing the body in other parts, and now we all know about people who have 30% of their body prosthetics. In fact, she has more prosthetics in her than this athlete who lost his legs. So we're getting to an era where we can start replacing things in the body and have increased performances. This machine, the typewriter, I'm sure that the younger generation have never seen it. It's a laptop that can print while it writes. Was invented in the 1800s by a guy who had a friend who was blind. And he figured out that if he can invent this machine that would help the blind write, he can help her. Later on, this became the tool that we all use to type. It started with a disability and ended up the tool that we all now use. If you try to write with your hand, you'll see how painful it is. We're not used to that anymore. I think that we're in an era where we have the tools and techniques to enhance the body in many ways. And now it's just a matter of time until we're all going to start realizing that we can connect the brain to machines and do a lot of remarkable things. And I predict that in our lifetime, we're going to be able to see a little bit of that already. People connecting to machines and activating them by thought alone. Thank you.